everyone, I'm Stefanie Regidor from BSED 4 and I'm going to tackle about the assessment for learning and assessment as learning or formative assessment and learning episode number 12. So first, let me introduce to you the learning outcomes. First is to demonstrate knowledge of the design and use of formative assessment. Second is to explain the importance of formative assessment. But before that, let us know what is assessment and why is it important. Assessment is the ongoing process of gathering, analyzing, and interpreting evidence, reflecting on findings, making informed and consistent judgment to improve student learning. So, it is important because assessment improves student learning and deep understanding requires a range of assessment practices to be used with three overarching purposes. So, the three overarching purposes are assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning, and later on, Miss Mariane Murillo will tackle about that. Assessment is an essential part of the instructional cycle. But first, let us define the instructional learning cycle or ILC. It is a process or structure that promotes collaboration and collective responsibility within a teacher team by setting up structures for short-term cycle of improvement. The instructional cycle consists of first setting the intended learning outcomes. So, CHED requires all higher education institutions in the country to go outcome-based education in its CHED Memo 46 series of 2012. Outcome-based teaching and learning is applied in the teaching-learning process. It is equivalent to competency-based and standard-based teaching and learning. When you apply OBTL, you see to it that the intended learning outcomes are aligned in the teaching-learning activities and in turn to the assessment task. In other words, in OBTL, you first establish your intended learning outcomes, then you will determine which teaching learning activities you will use and also the assessment tasks you will have to use to find out if you attained your intended learning outcome. Second is selecting a teaching methodology, strategy, and activity that are aligned to the learning outcome in topic which are developmentally appropriate to the learners. Teachers are best served when they utilize a variety of instructional strategies as opposed to one or two. Variety ensures that the students are never bored. It also ensures that students will likely be exposed to strategies that align with their preferred individualized learning style. Lastly, assessment itself. The assessment of student learning begins with educational values. It is not an end in itself but a vehicle for educational improvement. Its effective practices then begins with an exact vision of the kinds of learning we most value for students and strive to help them achieve. Assessment is the part of the instructional cycle that determines whether or not the intended learning outcome has been attained, and so necessarily, the assessment task must be aligned to the intended learning outcome. In a lesson on assessment, we can speak of assessment for learning, assessment of learning, and assessment as learning.
Good day, everyone. I am Mariane F. Murillo. Good day, everyone. I am Mariane F. Murillo, BSED 4. Today, I will discuss the continuation of FS1, Episode 12, which is Assessment for Learning and Assessment as Learning, Formative Assessment. In the formative assessment, one must be knowledgeable in outcome-based teaching learning, competences-based teaching, teaching by objective. We ensure that the intended outcome, competency, objective is attained at the end of the lesson. And so while we are still in the process of teaching, we do check learners' understanding and progress. In teaching formative assessment, As a teacher, we must hit the intended outcome, competency, and objective pertaining in the certain topics. As a teacher, we cannot immediately jump to another topic if the student failed to understand the initial topic. As a teacher, we need to address the learning gaps or the problem of the learners before it reach formative assessment. Because the failure of the student is the reflection of the failure of the teacher. Learners has their role in studying on their own. And also, teacher role is to ignite the learn and acquire knowledge cognitively by the teacher. If we find out the learners fail to understand prerequisite knowledge and skill, we reteach until learners master them. But we need to consider all learners. You will not consider students that are struggling with the topics, but all the learners. This is called formative assessment. Assessment while the learners are being formed or taught, it is assessment in the midst of instruction. So that teacher assess if we are going to proceed or not depend on the result of average performance of the class. Yes, teacher, we want to address, we want to help students along the way of all them as much as possible. But then again, there are also students that can easily pick up the topic, so we need to address their needs. This is the reason why placement assessment is very important. If ever that all students have excellent region and good performance, all of them can easily catch up. Reteaching certain topics, you can do it once, twice, but then again, it is up to us as a teacher if we need to proceed deadline. Being a teacher, we have a target. As much have you want as students, and students have also extended their efforts on reaching their knowledge. It is procedural assessment in the need of instruction. It has to be addressed immediately. Different types of assessment has been provided, especially in outcome-based education. So there have a different types of assessment. For example, is authentic assessment, traditional assessment, and portfolio. As a teacher, we need to be aware in different types of assessment.